everybody, and welcome to the Flute Practice. Today I am at the Flute Center of New York. Ta-da! We're going to be chatting to the guys from the Flute Center. They're going to give us lots of tips and tricks and things to look out for. So let's go check it out. I am sitting here with Emily, and we're going to ask her some really interesting and questions I wish I had answered when I bought my first flute. So the first big question I think for everybody is, when is it time to buy a new flute? When do you upgrade your flute?
Well, it's a very good question and one that we get a lot. The first easiest way to know if it's time to buy a new flute is to speak with your private teacher or a band director or your orchestra director, somebody who knows your playing and is more experienced with how instruments work. If you don't have a private teacher though, there still are ways to know. So a lot of times what people experience when they're ready to upgrade is that they can't do everything that they're trying to do on their flute anymore.
I remember that.
Yeah, and you've practiced it multiple ways, you've gone to your teachers, you've talked to your friends, and for some reason your flute won't diminuendo as much as you'd like, or it can't play as loudly as you'd hoped. And those are usually the first telltale signs.
And I imagine a good way to really be sure is maybe go and try. If your friend's got a good, better flute, go try it out. See if you can do those things on that instrument, and then you know.
Absolutely.
It's time.
Yeah, trying new flutes is the best way to figure out what is going to be right for you at any given time.
Okay, so decided to buy a new flute, and now what are the most important things to consider when I'm, walking into the shop or I'm calling in? What do you tell people to consider first?
Well, there are a ton of great flutes out there. So that's the first thing to know, is that you are going to be looking at an enormous selection, particularly if you come here. So one of the very first questions we tend to ask is about budget. So we sell flutes anywhere from around $500 all the way to $50,000, even more for some platinum flutes. So there's a huge range there, and we don't want to show flutes that are way too expensive, and we also don't want to show flutes that wouldn't be at the level that you're looking. So that's often the easiest way to narrow things down, and it can be a broad range, it can be a very specific, I cannot spend over X amount, but budget is the first way to kind of hone in.
Cool.
Yeah.
And when people are trying out flutes, what do you think is the most important thing when trying out a flute and playing on a flute?
Absolutely. The most important thing about a flute is the sound.
Yeah.
And how it's working with you to make the sound that you want, how it's working with what you're already doing. A flute ideally wouldn't feel like a totally foreign instrument. It should be helping with what you're already kind of working toward.
Yeah. I guess it becomes difficult when you've got a player that's not very experienced and they're coming in and maybe they don't really know what they want or look for. What would you suggest to a student like that?
Well, we always suggest that students play through each flute that they're trying for at least a few moments. Usually they know more than they think. So a lot of the times, even a younger student, maybe a middle schooler or even younger, maybe it's time for their first step-up flute. And we bring in 5 or 6 flutes and they test them all. And they're often surprised by their preferences, that they do indeed find 1 or 2 flutes that just resonates with them better than the others. So that's often the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So be brave, guys.
Just listen. Just listen.
I was speaking to the owner of this shop, Phil, and he was mentioning that one of your guys' kind of core philosophies is the fact that there's no such thing as one good flute, that every flute player finds their ideal flute, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think this is so cool, because this is really how I like to think about sound as well, that there's no such thing as one good sound. I think in your brochures you say something about finding your own voice, or...
Yes, it's all about finding the right flute for you, for the way you're playing. It's all about finding a flute that suits what you're doing and will help you know, you in your future playing and emphasizes what you want to do and how you want to sound, really. There is a flute for everyone, but every flute is not for everyone.
I like that.
If there was a perfect flute for us all, our store would be a very different place. We would have just one flute, but we have thousands of instruments, and there's really a flutist for each instrument and a flute for every flutist.
Awesome. There's kind of specific stuff about buying a flute that we need to know about. Specific like specs and things we need to look at. What are the kind of most important considerations?
Well, the first big one that affects every person shopping is inline or offset G.
Mm-hmm.
So on an inline G key, the keys are all in line with each other, hence the name. With an offset G key, the G key, which you depress with your third left-hand finger or your ring finger on your left hand, is offset, so it's a little easier to reach for many people. That's the first thing, because you can't change that on a flute, and a lot of people do have strong preferences one way or the other. The other specs that people consider are split E, C sharp trill, and sometimes people get interested in D sharp rollers. And then there's the world of head joints, where you can have upgrades. You could have a special riser or a special head joint metal that doesn't match the body. That's certainly an option.
I'm going to do a video on that soon, so I'm going to be releasing that soon, looking at head joints and exactly what they do. So stay tuned for that. Really, I mean, a lot of students will ask me, they'll say, hey, I found this really great flute on eBay or Amazon. Should I buy it? What advice would you give to people buying secondhand flutes? It's a hot, dangerous topic.
It is a hot, dangerous topic. Secondhand flutes can be a great option. It always depends on the flute, the price point, and where you're buying it. There are certainly good instruments on sites like eBay or Craigslist. You could certainly find a good one, but there also are definitely instruments that need a ton of repair work, and perhaps the amount of repair work is larger, the cost of the repair is larger than the value of the flute. And that is kind of a sad reality that can happen. But it's expensive to get flutes repaired, so it's something that you definitely should consider, because just because a flute plays does not mean that it doesn't need any work. That said, we sell used flutes. They're a really good option if you are, for example, looking to buy your first handmade professional instrument and you don't have $12,000 to buy a brand new all silver one, but you want an all silver one. So we have a ton of good options for that. Great. Really brings the price down. But focus on finding one that you trust who you're buying it from is a big deal. And then know that the one disadvantage is that you can't choose your specs. So we have a lot of used flutes that are beautiful, but many of them are inline G, which is a little less commonly requested among younger players. So that can be a little bit tricky. That, you know, if you have a very set idea of what you like, it's kind of tricky to find that in a used instrument, but it does happen, and people get really lucky and they get great deals when that works out.
And I just want to give a little shout out to their used flutes. I've actually tried a bunch of them as well, and there's some really amazing instruments. You know, I do not hesitate to recommend buying a used flute from these guys. Really, it's awesome. Cool, everybody. That was a nice look at how to buy a flute, what you got to know, what you got to look at. We will be looking kind of progressively over the next couple of months at different aspects of buying flutes, looking at flutes, trying, testing flutes, the works. So until then, happy practicing, happy flute shopping, and see you next time.